Hi, Zizaran here, and welcome to the first episode of this season's Path of Exile University. We're going to be starting with PoE 101, and this is an introductory lesson for players that are new to Path of Exile and wanting to see if this is the kind of game they want to play, or just learn more about it for players that are already playing. But you don't require any prior knowledge for this episode, and we're going to try to do it as basic as possible. So, this class is for people that are unfamiliar with Path of Exile. And Path of Exile is an isometric ARPG. That means it's like a top-down view, and online only. So a online or a connection is required to play at all times. It does not have any offline mode or single player. And you can play solo or upwards of a group of a total of 6 people. So you can play this game with your friend, or friends if you have multiple. And it's a very, very rewarding game. Like, you do get a lot back for the effort that you put into the game. And the best thing, my biggest pitch for Path of Exile, is that it gets constant content updates more than any other game. So if you're currently playing a game and it's been maybe a year or 6 months since the last update, PoE gets an update every 3 months. It has a large amount of replayability, so it's really, really nice, and you get a lot back for your time. So the things that we're going to cover in this lesson is basically talking about leagues and what they are, how they work, softcore versus hardcore, the leagues versus standard, which is like a permanent game mode, etc. And if you're going to play alone or trading, we're going to talk about classes. We're going to talk about the passive skill tree. We're going to talk about skill gems. We're going to explain the campaign and some basic itemization like the currency system in the game. Like a lot of games have gold and stuff like that. So that's what's going to be covered. So we're going to start and talk about leagues. In other games, this could be called things like seasons. Yeah, I can't remember any other names for it off the top of my head. But anyway, leagues or seasons. So first off, you can choose whether you're playing hardcore or softcore. And in some games, you completely lose the character on death when you're playing on hardcore. But in Path of Exile, if you're playing a hardcore league, then when you die, the character gets removed and put into permanent standard, which for a lot of people that regularly play hardcore, it becomes like a testing ground. So it's actually like a really, really good way of doing it, because you are still effectively losing the character. However, you do get to keep it for testing. So maybe there's a new boss that you haven't quite been able to do yet, and you want to try it out on your character first. So hardcore can be really, really fun. There's a couple of benefits to hardcore. Like, you really get a nice adrenaline rush. However, it does require quite a lot of knowledge, and more importantly, a lot more time. And I'm sure a lot of people are curious, are there any like actual advantages to playing hardcore? Like, is there increased drop rates? No, there isn't. What about softcore? So whenever you've gotten like past the campaign in softcore, you start losing experience. I think you start losing XP already in Act 5, but once you finish the entire campaign, you lose 10% of your character's experience on death. You can never lose a level, or like once you are on 0% XP, there is actually no penalty for dying on softcore. But you don't get kicked out of the league, and it's a lot easier experience, and I usually would recommend the softcore league to start with. So that's like the best place to start. And what are leagues? So Path of Exile have like these temporary leagues or seasons, and it's a fresh start for everybody. Everything starts over completely, and it happens every 3 months. You don't lose any cosmetics or stash tabs or anything you've bought, and the ones from the previous league will get moved to standard, which we'll talk about in a second. But it is a fresh start. Everybody starts from the same, and it's a really, really enjoyable experience. I think most Path of Exile players would say that they really love the first few days. Like, the first few days are really, really special. You have global notifications of people being the first to enter maps. If you're playing hardcore, there are global notifications of people dying, and it's really, really exciting. Honestly, even like worth like trying a little bit at the league start on hardcore, just to see the notifications of people dying, because it's really fun to see people dying at rank 1, rank 5, etc., and seeing a global alert for that. And another exciting thing at the start of the league is that the economy is so fresh and healthy. People are actually replying very often to trades, which later in the league, as you can imagine, some people might just ignore trading, but not that important. But, you know, everything is new and exciting. Every item matters. So definitely do recommend the start. And if you're wondering when the next start is, it's coming up on the 16th of April. Is the new league. So that's really exciting. And you could start a character on standard as well. However, most people do start on the leagues because of the fresh and healthy economy. Standard is more popular with people they have been playing in the past, but they don't like have the time to level up a new character every 3 months, and they just want to do a few maps. Like if you're playing like less than 10 hours a month, standard is probably perfect for you. But regardless of anything, I would always start on a temporary league because there's no exit of any items or anything basically in the standard economy. So it's very hard to find anything worth anything, which is obviously a large part of the game is finding things that are worth selling and exciting. But yeah. Let's see. So there are several different leagues, and we have already showed them in the top right corner here. So you can see that there's standard, hardcore, there's SSF standard and SSF hardcore, and SSF stands for solo self-found. That means that you are completely on your own. You can't trade or interact with anyone. Nobody can help you with bosses. Nobody can give you any items. And there's no advantage to this either. This is just like an extra challenge that you do on your own. This is particularly perfect for a lot of events and stuff that I organize, but it is like an added challenge to increase the longevity of the game if you feel that you're running out of content too fast. And if we keep going downwards, you see we have ritual, hardcore ritual, and solo self-fun ritual, and ritual hardcore solo self-fun. So ritual is right now the current challenge league that we are playing, and the new one is coming up on the 16th of April, which is called Ultimatum. And then these will no longer, the four at the bottom here, ritual, will be put into, like ritual will go into standard, solo self-fun ritual will go into solo self-fun standard, and you can continue all the progress you had there. You're just not allowed to experience the new league because that is like league only content. And every large expansion, there generally will be new content coming to standard as well. But let's talk a little bit about the benefits and downsides of what we call trade league. So in this case, that would be ritual. When you're playing trade league, that means that you can sell all your items. You're not just all on your own. You can play with your friends. If you're stuck on a boss, you can ask for help. And especially on the softcore trade league, so ritual in this case, pretty much every item you would need for a build would be available. Whereas if you're playing hardcore trade league, obviously a lot less. There's probably only 5 or 10% of the player base, maybe even less now, that play hardcore trade league. Because solo self-fun has gotten such an insurgence in popularity, or surge in popularity, that it can be really, really hard. You are able to buy the majority of items that you want, but sometimes like really, really niche items and buying things in like bulk, getting a large amount of things can be really hard on the hardcore leagues. But yeah. And it really does make the game a lot easier. Even like there's a very large difference between playing softcore trade and softcore solo self-fun, because when you're able to buy items easily of other players, you get such a large power spike where crafting and finding the items yourself might be really difficult. Especially if you're playing softcore trade league, this third line is very, very important. Scamming is very, very frequent. There's obviously such a large amount of people trying out the game. So I have a separate video dedicated to like alerting you of what all the different scams are. Like people will try to trick you out of valuable items that you might not know are valuable as a new player, which is unfortunate. Does not happen that much on hardcore because there's not as many new players there. Let's talk a little bit about the benefits and downsides of solo self-fun. So you are completely on your own, and it's a very, very interesting challenge because everything you've done, you've achieved. You haven't gotten help from everything, and you can prove it, right? Because there's no way to like cheat that system. And it's just an additional challenge. It can be absolutely brutal. Sometimes you're missing the currency you need. Maybe you're not able to find the item you need. And even regardless if you're a softcore or hardcore, it really tests your knowledge of the game, and it forces you to learn a lot. So for players that really like that type of gameplay and want to be challenged really hard, where you do have to like ask people for help, like advice, and you do have to follow guides and use third-party software to maybe like explore or research the game Wikipedia, solo self-found is a really, really good experience and forces you to learn very quickly. Um, and it's obviously particularly where we do events, because if we did events with monetary cash prizes in Trade League, we'd end up having hundreds of people helping one person, and that obviously wouldn't work very well. So something in these games that is a very, very important thing for some people is a chase item. Like and a chase item is something that's just very, very exciting to find. And the beauty of solo self-found is that anything can be a chase item, because sometimes you might need a fairly common item for a build to make it work, and you might just be very unlucky. But when you finally drop it, that feels really, really good. So in Trade League, whenever there have been like increasing drop rates and making things easier to find, something that might be very exciting to find in solo self-found could just be very, very little worth in Trade League. So there's some choice involved here. So Path of Exile has a bunch of different classes, and there are 7 base classes, and this also are followed by subclasses called ascendancy classes. So each class has 3 ascendancy classes, which is like specializations, and the Scion only has 1, but we'll get into that later. But unlike most games, there aren't like abilities locked into certain classes or certain ascendancy. So for example, here we have the Shadow, the Templar, and the Witch. And the Shadow, around like level 30 to 40, depending on how fast you are, can ascend into a Assassin, a Trickster, or a Saboteur. But none of these, like the base class or the ascendancies themselves, don't lock any skills behind them. So technically, there's nothing from stopping you from making a, just to be a little crazy here, you could make a Saboteur using 2-handed swords and a skill called Reeve, for example. You could do that. So you aren't as like locked in as in a lot of other games. Like there are other games, like let's say Diablo 2, where you can't use Chain Lightning on a Barbarian. You can't use Throw Axe on a Sorceress, and that's really, really cool here. And the ascendancies and classes, they do have like certain benefits, but you have a lot of choice as well. So once you start looking at guides and once you start like exploring a little bit, you will see like, oh, I'm kind of pushed in this direction, which is very exciting. The game lets you like discover and find out a lot of combinations. The very big downside to all of this choice is that it can be very, very complicated, and I really do recommend following build guides for new players. I personally make a lot of build guides for League Start, where we try to help people, because when you're new to the game, you might not really understand how a build scales. The game itself doesn't really do a great job of teaching you that. So definitely would recommend build guides. So yeah, at the end of the day, archetypes don't really exist in this, and most classes can do any playstyle while still being nudged or pushed in one direction. And you will have some things like the Scion can pretty much do everything. The Scion is like a jack of all trades, master of none, and it's actually the only class that you can't start with when you have a fresh character. You need to get to Act 3 and climb Dominus's temple, and you're able to rescue the Scion and then start playing it. Depending on balance changes, the Scion is either completely broken, where everybody plays Scion, or nobody plays Scion because it's trash. It's very, very rarely that it's anywhere in between. So it's an interesting one for sure. And again, if you are the kind of player that like just love learning by yourself and exploring, the only way to play a video game wrong is to not have fun. So feel free to start on your own, but I do heavily recommend guides, which we are posting as soon as patch notes come out, which is Tuesday, basically midnight my time, Tuesday the 13th. And after that, we're going to start posting as many guides as possible. So there's two different ways of selecting what class you're going to play. You can look at build guides from different players, and there are many good guides on YouTube. It's not always that easy to find any guides. There's not really any good Path of Exile website. A quick word of warning, a lot of websites that do have build guides, some of them are known for having intentionally bad build guides and then suggesting that you use real money trading, which is against the game's TOS, to fix the holes in the build. So it's like a front, I guess you could say. There is also a Path of Exile build forum, and there are a lot of good builds there. The problem is there are also a lot of bad builds there, and that can be hard to know. Most PoE streamers and YouTubers do have fairly solid builds, and if they don't, it would be like shredded in the comments, and you can usually tell in the comments if a build is solid or not. But we have very, very solid builds, which I would say are currently the best build guides in Path of Exile. So they'll be coming up soon. And that is one good way to choose, is to just look through a bunch of people's videos and say, hey, this looks fun, I want to play this. You could also just be exploring in-game and seeing what skill you like. Just like looking up loads of skills like Fireball, Spark. You might just like the feel of a skill or the way it looks. Like sometimes just Fireball looks really cool, or Spark looks really cool. Maybe you really want to play a melee character. Maybe you really want to play a bow character. The downside to just like picking something for the skill or picking something like that is that you might have a hard time finding any resources for help. But there are upsides as well. You could discover something that other people haven't. Maybe you'll find some sort of secret build that might be really strong. And especially if you're following something that's maybe a less popular guide or like less explored, a lot of the gear and stuff you need might be really, really cheap. So there's a lot of like pros and cons here. So let's talk a little bit about character progression in PoE and how leveling up and stuff like that works. So you do receive 1 point per level, and then you get either 22 or 24 passive skill points from quests. And this is how we start filling out our passive skill tree, which looks incredibly overwhelming when you start playing Path of Exile. And we can do it a very quick dip in-game here. And you can see that the Path of Exile skill tree is very, very large. And we often get to see new streamers have like a, wow, this is like huge. And they gasp because it looks very, very complicated. Now, it does actually look more complicated than it is. Thankfully, and this is obviously where guides come in handy and try to teach you what to do, usually step by step every point. You do also have 8 ascendancy points, which is the subclass thing I talked about, and at different periods during the game you'll get like 2 at a time. So the first one is around level 30 to 40, and as you progress and get stronger and unlock the trials of ascendancy, you're able to get up to a total of 8. And ascendancy points are very, very strong, and they can very much influence what kind of build you're doing and where you're getting your damage or defense from. And it's very important. You've got to build defense in this game. These ascendancy points is gained from something called Zizaran's Labyrinth. So during the campaign, you'll start finding trials, and once you've completed the first 6 trials, you're then allowed entry to the labyrinth, which is, regardless if you're playing hardcore or softcore, the labyrinth is sort of a medium core where even if you're at the end of the labyrinth but you die to Zizaran, you have to start all over again. You can't just like corpse rush the boss. So this can be very, very challenging for a new player while you're getting used to the gameplay. There's also quite a lot of rewards. Like there's some enchants which will like make some of your existing items stronger without like rolling them or anything. It's just a buff. And there are rewards from chests at the end as well. Now, skill points in Path of Exile, they do need to be like chained together. So if you do see the skill point here, you can see that this character is a witch. It is a witch occultist. And So this is like the ascendancy tree, and you can see that everything is linked together, with few exceptions that aren't worth explaining right now. But everything is linked together, so you can't just like start taking some points. I can't just put 5 points down here. Let's see. And yeah, one of the benefits of Scion is that has like a special ability at the late game where you can use any of the starting positions to save some points. So what do you gain when you level up? Whenever you gain, oops, actually, sorry. Let's talk about attributes first before you gain level up. So you have those like passive trees, or sorry, let's call them traveling nodes. These things here are like traveling nodes. You can see that they give int, they give strength, they give dexterity, and every 10 strength gains an additional 5 life and 2% melee physical damage. Every 10 intelligence grants 5 mana and 2% increased energy shield. And every 10 dexterity grants you additional 20 accuracy and 2% evasion. And you don't gain any of these when leveling up. You gain a little bit of life and a little bit of mana per level, and that's it. Like a level 1 character will have the same, like, it wouldn't have any stats different than a level 100 character except from skill points. So next up we have skills and support gems, and this is a very, very cool thing in Path of Exile. And your gear will have different types of sockets, and this is getting changed in PoE 2 a little bit, but that is a very, very long time away. We don't really know when, but it is far into the future. So let's start with active gems. Active gems provide a skill that you can use, cast, or trigger with different options. And an active gem would be something like Fireball, which causes your character, or gets your character, the ability to, cast a ball of fire. You have Spark, which lets your character cast some lightning, and then you have loads of other abilities. You have like things like curses, you have auras that might make your character stronger but might reserve some of your mana so you can't use it. And you have melee abilities like Cyclone, Reeve, Sunder, and these are all active gems. Now these can be linked together with passive gems, which, let's say that you have Spark. Well, maybe it's getting really, really annoying that every spark projectile stops the second it hits a monster. So then you could link a gem called Pierce to your spark, and now they're still dealing damage, but actually going through the monsters. You could be doing Fireball, and maybe you want more Fireballs, then you can link lesser multiple projectiles or greater multiple projectiles to get more. And that's a really, really cool system. And it gets you a lot of like creative freedom on like how to scale the build, what to do with it, and it's a very, very interesting system. You can acquire skill gems. You do get some from the quest rewards, and there is a gem vendor as well. Once you get to Act 3, it'll unlock any previous gem, and once you get to Act 6, you will unlock every gem in the game. The Act 3 one only unlocks the ones that are Act 3 and previous. Some skill gems, like especially early, the first 4 acts, will be locked behind classes. It's kind of outdated and doesn't really make that much sense for the game anymore, because it means that some classes are just kind of screwed, especially in early league. If you're playing solo self-on, it means that you might have to, we call it muling. Like, for example, not every character starts with the support gem Onslaught that a lot of people use to go faster. So the Scion does start with that. So a trick that a lot of players will use at a league start is they might make a Scion, just kill like the first boss, and then you have the Onslaught support gem to use on other characters. Obviously, this is only a problem on solo self-on. If you're on trade league, you can just play with your friends and have your friends get the skill gems for you. And you can't stack support skills in any way in a single link. Like, you can't have, for example, Fireball linked with 3 multiple projectiles. That wouldn't work. You could do lesser and greater multiple projectiles, but you can't do like 3 greater multiple projectiles. And as another example, like Fireball with 5 times combustion, which is like increased fire damage. And there's actually a feature, we can show it real quick in game too, but you can hover over. Let's see, where's my active gem? If I hover over my active gem here, you can see which one are connected to the gem. They all get highlighted. So if I select the support gem, the Solren gets highlighted because FXE is affecting Solren. Lesser multiple projectiles is affecting Solren, and controlled destruction is affecting Solren. So they do all get highlighted. Let's see. So skill gems are separated in a few different ways, and you might have noticed we have different colors of gems. There's blue, red, and green gems, and there are some very, very few white ones. The white ones can basically be put in any color socket, and the blue ones are limited to color sockets on gear, which we'll talk about in a bit. There are also like the blue gems are int gems, the red gems are strength gems, and the green ones are dexterity gems. So that means that they will require that stat to be able to wield them, especially at higher levels. There are also other ways of separating gems. Some will be attack based, some will be spell based, and that will also be based like it'll affect what they can be supported by. So like a spell gem cannot be supported by attack based support gems. So we have melee attacks, we have projectiles, we have targeted spells, we have mines, traps, totems, brands, minions, and auras. These are some examples of like the different like delivery ways. So like auras would be, for example, that they reserve part of your mana and they make your character stronger. Minions are, well, you know, summons that you summon and they will protect you or help you. Brands and totems are kind of similar. Totems are basically sticks that will fire spells from the totem. They can be killed by the enemy. Brands, sort of similar. Best way to think about a brand is like an invulnerable totem. That also, like, they have different support gems and stuff like that. And then, yeah, we have a lot of different types of gems in Path of Exile, which is very interesting and can take a while to learn all the differences. So, there's a very, very big difference between spell gems and attack gems. And spell gems are very, very popular in starter guides because they can be incredibly easy to scale and build around. There's some really, really big benefits that for example, Fireball will be gaining a large amount of power just from the level of the gem itself. So if I'm leveling, or maybe I'm struggling a little bit, I'm a new player, I'm struggling, and I want to just get a little bit more power before approaching the next boss. So then when entering a new area, I'll hold the control key down, and then you could, it'll pop up a panel and it'll let you farm this area over and over again to gain levels. And spell gems really, really benefit from this, because every time a spell gains a level, like Fireball going from level 67, it gains anywhere from like a 10 to 20% damage boost, which something like a melee attack or a bow attack would not most of the time. So it's really, really big. Here as well, we can see that the Fireball gem has different tags. So this is a projectile, it's a spell, it's an area of effect, and it's fire. So we can see here on the support gem that combustion support is for fire and support. So, you know, you can sort of, by exploring the tag system combined with, you know, hovering over it, you can see what is going to work together. Like, very, very handy to look at the tag system. And same if we had lesser multiple projectiles here, we would see that lesser multiple projectiles has the tag projectile. So, here we can gain damage from fire damage, we can get elemental damage, we can get spell damage, or we could like start focusing around crit. So how is this different from attack gems? Well, attack gems is all based on the gear and weapons you're using. So whenever you are going from, like, let's say Reeve, which is like a slashing skill, where you go from level 6 to level 7, this might only get 1% increased damage, which is obviously very, very much less. So this is all about the weapons you're using. And this might still be really, really good, because you might find a really, really good weapon while leveling and get a huge power boost. And it doesn't really matter about like leveling up the gem itself in the same way. There are some attacks that behave like spells. As a quick example, like Elemental Hit will scale similarly to a spell where all of its scaling is per level. So at the late game, a big difference here would be most attacks would be looking for just a really powerful weapon, whereas Elemental Hit would be looking for plus additional gem level. Um, but for the most part, as a rule of thumb, spells, huge per level, and attack gems, all about the gear. Um, so, as you can see here, we have some bonuses that are compatible with attacks. So physical damage can increase it. You can get like flat attacks, like flat elemental damage to attacks, projectile damage, attack speed, or you can maybe scale your attacks around bleeding and making the enemies take damage over time. So if we look at Smite here, you can see that this has a bunch of different tags. It has lightning, attack, area of effect, duration, melee, strike, and aura. So it has so many different tags, and this opens up for a lot of different things. So we can do Smite, and we can do melee splash, we can do melee physical damage, we can do increased area of attacks. Like, there's so many things that we can pair up with this. And yeah, you can see all the tags here, and same here, right? Melee splash support, we can pair the AoE with the AoE here, so then we know that it's going to be paired up together. So it's very, very important to pay attention to the tags. Another thing that you can notice in-game is, let's see, if we look at my Wither here, which is like a debuff skill, if I remove multiple totems, you can see that it's losing one of the numbers, like one of the tags. And this is a good, so you see here it has the F and a big T and a V. And when I remove this, it's removing one of the letters. That's another like quick thing you can look at to see if it's actually affecting the gem. Because there are sometimes you might be using a support gem that actually doesn't work with that active gem. So support skills modify in different ways, and it's not always clear how they change the skill or the behavior of it. But Fireball and increased AoE will make the explosion itself larger. The projectiles are going to remain the same size, but whenever it hits something, it'll explode in a larger area. Whereas if you're using the skill Reave and increased area of effect, you'll get like a bigger area that you can attack in. And then Fireball and lesser multiple projectiles will give you more fireballs per cast, but each fireball will do less damage. And then you have another one, which is Barrage, which is like a wand attack. And if you're using this with lesser multiple projectiles, it wouldn't spread out like a fireball would, but it'll fire more projectiles in a line. And another thing we haven't talked about yet is Vol skills, which is, well, a normal skill would normally require mana to use it, whereas a Vol skill is basically, think of it like an ultimate or something like that, and they're actually getting a buff in the upcoming Ultimatum League. Ultimatum. And they're basically like an ulti that you're using the souls of your enemies to cast it. And whenever you're fighting a boss as well, that is going to give you a large amount of souls. So, for example, Val Fireball would fire a huge circle of fireballs around you. Like Blight is like a chaos damage over time skill, and Val Blight fires like a huge chaos explosion around you. So they're really, really good for saving for like large, rare single target monsters. So let's talk about the sockets. We've already brushed on it a little bit, and you can see the sockets in the top right here. We have a helmet that is 2 blue sockets, 1 red and a green, and you can see that these 3 are linked and the green one here isn't. So here, for example, I could have, let's say I have Fireball. I can have Combustion, which is a fire support gem that makes Fireball do more damage and lower the resist of the enemies. And then we can do Fire Penetration, which makes it like ignore more of the fire resist. And then you could have lesser multiple projectiles, which is would make more fireballs. However, if we have lesser multiple projectiles here right now, it's not linked, so it wouldn't do anything. So this is a common mistake for new players, that they might put in like an extra support gem here, but not be clear why it's not working. So these links between something is very, very important. And for a chest piece or a two-hander, the max amount of links on an item is a 6 linked item, and that can be very, very rare. There is like a easy accessible 6 link as well, which is called a tabula rasa, and that is like fairly cheap and accessible as far as 6 links go. You can see that this is also a white support gem, a white socket link. That means that you can put any gem, any support gem or active gem in here, whereas there obviously only blue active or support gems will go. Yeah, only gems linked to each other provide bonuses. So this is what we call a 4 link. This is what we call a 6 link. And yeah, this could also be beneficial. You don't always want the max amount of links on an item. So for example, say you want like a few abilities here, or maybe you want some auras here, or an aura with a support gem. And if you put a good quick example is, let's say the green aura called Grace. Grace gives your character more evasion, which is a defensive stat. But if you had, for whatever reason, increased area of effect here, and this was actually 4 linked, then that would make Grace require more mana. So sometimes it would be a disadvantage to have everything linked. So you have a skill hotbar, and you actually have 2, and you can put any skill on any slot here. So the first thing you should do in game is that mouse button 1 should be on move only. By default, it is default attack. And lately, I think the last 6 months, we basically got a second skill bar, which you access by holding control. So if you see behind me here, you can see whenever I'm clicking control, there are some differences, like it is changing a little bit. Now, an important thing to note that I just want to get quickly out of the way, because a lot of people don't know about this, you can rebind the second bar here. So you don't actually need to hold control. A really quick example of this is there's a movement ability called Flame Dash, and a lot of people are like, how are you using Flame Dash, Zizaran? And I'll say, well, it's on my second bar. So if I hold control now, you can see that Flame Dash is just bound to mouse button 5 on the second bar. I don't need to hold control on mouse button 5. It's just you can rebind it to whatever you want. This is very, very useful and something a lot of people don't know about, surprisingly. But it's great. Attack in place is useful for performing actions. So if you see in the top right corner, this is an unticked, always attack without moving. You should pretty much always have this ticked. It basically means some abilities will move towards the monster before using it to make sure you're in range. However, you probably want to just always make a habit of tagging the always attack without moving. The only thing I can think of where you don't want this is dash. It'll make you go backwards. But yeah. Later on, as a more advanced thing, some instant skills, especially defensive abilities, can be put on mouse button 1. And this basically turns it into auto casting. So a quick example of that is there's a defensive ability called Steel Skin, which puts like an armor around your character, and this is completely instant. It has no cast time. It just like whenever you click it, it instantly casts it, and anything that is instantly cast, you can auto cast by putting it on mouse button 1, and you'll still be able to use mouse button. You'll still be able to put mouse button 1 as like a instant cast or move around and stuff. So it's really, really good. Detonate mines is very popular there as well. So navigating the campaign, there is a world map and there are waypoints. So if we look here on the left, you can see that this one that's filled in, that means that there is a waypoint in the zone and you've clicked on it. Like you've actually recovered the waypoint and you can now use it. Here we have, there is a waypoint in the zone, but you have not yet found it and clicked on it. And this one that's like completely not filled in means that there is no waypoint in the zone. There's a lot of side zones as well. So this one here is just the fetid pool. There's no reason for you to go in there early. It's respec points for like if you've done a choice and you want to regret it, basically. And like I mentioned earlier, if you are creating a new instance, you can hold control click on a waypoint and make a new one. Maybe you want to stay in one zone and gather more power before adventuring onwards. But yeah, very good to know about the control click for entering a zone. And yeah, generally it's fairly linear. It's fairly easy to tell where you're going, and uh, the questing game for the campaign will make it'll guide you in the right direction, and it's fairly linear. You just move towards the end basically. Um, so we have an overlay and a minimap, and you have in the options you have like different opacity settings. You can use the one in the top right if you don't want it in the middle of the screen. I usually have it like pretty low opacity and in the middle of the screen. I usually look at the map more than the game itself. And you can zoom in with like numpad plus or numpad minus, and yeah, there's also, you can zoom in on your character too with the mouse wheel, or you could disable the mouse wheel as most people do so you don't accidentally zoom in. There is also an auto center for the minimap, which is actually a setting you need to tick in the user interface. So let's talk a little bit about leveling in the campaign and stuff. Most people would probably be leveling up solo. You can level in groups and play with your friends as well, but there is no boosting. There is no like you can't just like help somebody skip the campaign. No matter what you do need to do all of the campaign, it's 10 acts, and then you get to the epilogue and you get to start mapping. So it does not have like a adventure mode or power leveling, like for example Diablo 3. And you can't just like, you can't easily skip somebody through the campaign like Diablo 2. And each character has to complete the labyrinth to ascend as well. But the trials to be able to open it is it's solved. Like once you've done it on one character, you don't have to do it again until a new league does the full reset. A very important thing to notice is that once you fight Kitava, which is the Act 5 boss, it's also in Act 10. Each time you defeat Kitava, you lose resistances, but you do still need to do it, unfortunately. You lose 30 resistances of the elemental ones, and it's important to remember that it's always 30. It's not sometimes 10 and sometimes 40, so you can kind of prepare for the resist loss before doing the boss and maybe farm an area. And resists are extremely important in Path of Exile. They aren't, you do actually lose Chaos Resist too, sorry. Resists are extremely important in Path of Exile, and the game basically, it's kind of mandatory. I'd say a lot of people try to be resist capped, especially in hardcore, as early as Act 3 or Act 4. And you'll really notice, especially in Act 6, if you aren't resist capped, you are going to get shredded. The game does sort of try to teach you about resist early on, with Merveil, the first boss, being basically mostly cold damage, a little bit of fire from some summons, and then you have the Act 2 boss is mostly lightning, and the Act 3 boss, Piety, is mostly fire. So it does sort of like try to teach you, but after Act 3 especially, you really want to have at least 50 to 70 resists, the max being 75. But yeah, very important. So there's different types of items and currency that are acquired from monsters, and you can find them from like quest rewards, chests. You can buy them from the vendor, and well, it's pretty simple. The more monsters you kill, the more items and currency you're going to get. That makes it that a lot of players really like playing, especially at the end game, very efficiently. Like, it's all about speed at the end game for a lot of players. And there are different types of rarities as well. Like, obviously, you have rare items, you have magic items, and we'll be covering that, especially more in the next episode, which is all about gear. But we'll be looking a little bit at this as well. Some items will be locked behind certain bosses, like some are boss only drops, and there are also some that are only from leagues. Like, there's some uniques that you can only get by interacting with past league mechanics or current ones. There's also level requirements on drops. Like, whenever you're level 10 or 15, you don't have access to all the different items in the game. And even on like magic or rare items, these also have like item level rules on rolls, so that you do get a really good sense of progression while you're going through the campaign and entering the different parts of the endgame. So all mods on the items are rolled at random, and you can't have two completely identical mods at the same time. So let's say you get flat physical damage to attacks, you can't get 3 stacks of flat physical damage to attacks on an item. And there are some things you can do, like increased item quantity or increased item rarity, that'll affect how things drop in different ways. And yeah, you have the 4 different tier of rarities. You have unique items or legendaries. You have rare items or yellow items. You have blue items or magical items. And then you have white items, which is just normal base types. So these are all leather belts, and then the 4 different types. There are no set items in this game. So that is a very big change from Diablo for those that are coming over from there. And a normal or white item, it will have like no explicit mods. Some items, like the one we're showing right now, a leather belt, can have up to 40 flat life on it. This is called an implicit, and you know, that's there, and then you can craft on it later. A magic or blue item can have 2 explicit mods. There's a prefix and 1 suffix. It can't have 2 prefixes or 2 suffixes. It can only have 1 of each while it is blue. And a rare or yellow item can have 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes. It can't have 4 prefixes and 2 suffixes, although there is one exception to that, but generally not. Orange items or legendaries, uniques, whatever you want to call them, they have generally, a lot of the time, they will have special mods that you can't acquire in other ways. So they can be really special or unique, one could say. They aren't necessarily better. In a lot of games, unique items are very strong, and some people might be coming from games where your entire character might be decked out in unique items, whereas in Path of Exile, rare items is like the cornerstone, where you might have 1 or 2 unique items that are very unique and something you just cannot in any way obtain on rare items, and then there's rare items built up around that. So, something that can be a little bit overwhelming when you start is the currency system in Path of Exile. It is very good at specifying what it does on it. Like this one here will re-roll a rare item, so basically it removes everything that was previously on it and re-rolls it. Yeah, I would make sure that you read everything. There's some things that are easy to miss, like, for example, quick example here. If you hover over a jeweler orb, even in the text below, it says the item's quality increases the chances of obtaining more sockets. And that's something a lot of people are like, how do you know that it does that? Well, you know, you can read the orbs, and that helps. And while reading isn't my strong suit, I do really recommend it. Yeah, most of the currency, or all the currency, can drop. There's nothing really locked behind like vendors or recipes, and the vendors can actually convert currency for you. Like, for example, whenever you learn about an orb of jeweler, you can sell 4 orb of jeweler to the vendor for 1 fusing. So there are some conversion recipes as well. Yeah, so we can take questions now at the end. And this was supposed to be a very like basic introduction for those that are completely new to Path of Exile. We're trying out a little bit of a new structure, and we obviously have like more introductory classes and more advanced lessons coming up as well. Gear 101 is being followed up after this, and we're gonna progressively go more advanced throughout the different lessons. There are a lot of lessons from the last semester of Path of Exile University, so make sure you check those out as well. And we are doing this before every league start. And before we start taking questions, if you are enjoying Path of Exile University, a good way to support it is you can go to shop.zizaran.com and we have a completely new t-shirt for the semester. So that is one way to support it if you do like it. It is made by SK Guno. You can buy one with banner or without. But it's a cute little token. Good way to support if you like the content and it helps you. But let's take some questions. I do have a few questions. First, do you feel it's beneficial to rush through the acts on your second character? Is it better to slowly work your way and learn the acts by heart? Kind of depends what your goal is, but generally the faster you get through the acts is the better, pretty much. And this for the questions and answers here is specifically going to be like very like related to this lesson or new ones, because a lot of the questions, especially more advanced ones, are answered in other lessons. And obviously we have a lot more. How do you enable attack without moving? So you click on the skill, and then at the top it'll have this, so you can like enable that for every skill. You just click on the skill in your toolbar. Where's your tie? Don't have one. Well, I do, but I don't want to use one. How does transferring solo self onto a trade league work? So that's a good thing to mention, that you can transfer characters. So if I transfer this now, this character would go from solo self on ritual hardcore. It will go to ritual hardcore. And there's another transfer I can do by standing still and let monsters hit me, and that will transfer my character to standard. If I migrate all, then like it'll say like operation includes items, stash tabs, hideout, master, and atlas state. Should I be reading every quest dialogue I come across, or does the lore not matter much? No, you also additionally don't really have to talk to the quest NPCs when you do know what to do. Most of them you don't actually need to talk to, but they will point you in the right direction. But the best thing is going to be to read the quest objective and what it does here. You have used Dasher to talk to Oyun in town for a reward. So it will tell you by clicking U, it will tell you what to do. How experienced should I be for hardcore? So it's not necessarily about how experienced. It just depends a little bit on how you enjoy playing games. A little bit about how much time you have, because whenever a lot of players don't like getting killed in a way that they didn't really understand how they died, and yeah, it can be very punishing. The game really doesn't tell you how you died, so sometimes you just, oh, it says resurrect in town, what killed me? Well, I have no idea. A good way to learn, if you do want to start out playing hardcore, I did, like, I've never played softcore. When I started and stuff like that, I didn't like do 2 or 3 leagues in softcore and jump over to hardcore. But a good idea is to record when you're playing, so that if you do die or something happens, you can watch it back and see what happened or what went wrong. But I'd say it's more about time, and if you prefer the adrenaline of almost dying. Do I need to follow a guide for my first playthrough? I always recommend it, especially for your character. Because it's very easy to fuck up, and the respec system in Path of Exile is, in my opinion, not very good. I think it should be far more lenient on your first 70 levels, so that if you do get like level 50 and you're like, wow, this character is trash, and you decide, you know what, maybe I should follow a build guide, well, then you realize that it's actually going to be very expensive and you can't respec. So I would recommend following a build guide from the start. Is there a way to make currency, sell items without owning premium stash ups as a new player? Yes, you can do it through the forums. There's also a program called Acquisition, which I'm pretty sure still works. Did you skip the passive skill point quest on League Stars? No, I usually do them as I go. On hardcore, I will skip Gruthkul and maybe some of like the Act 7 or Act 8 skill points and Yugul. TLDR tips to finish acts faster than 10 hours. It's all about practice. I would recommend watching people like Havoc616 and Tai Killer. We do have racing PoE universities as well from last semester. Yeah, it's all about like actively practicing. So our passive skills matter a lot? Yes. Large amount. If you die in hardcore, do you lose your stashed items? No. Anything that's stashed, you keep. So if I died on this character right now, this would be lost. But everything that I have in the stash here would be kept. it better to level with your planned endgame skill or using a guaranteed good skill like AD Contagion? So that depends a little bit. Sometimes there are some leveling skills that are just incredibly strong, and you'd see a lot of advanced players. Like normally what I will do is, for example, I'll level with Orb of Storms and Stormblast Mine, which are very, very strong leveling skills. And I'll have, what I'll do with my stash tabs is I'll have leveling gear. So I have like tabs set up with like lightning damage or +1 lightning skills. And I'll level very quickly with that and then do a respec at the end game. And do it a lot faster because I can finish the campaign in like 3 or 4 hours. Schedule this on Twitter. Without having strong knowledge of the skill tree, how should I manage to make a new one for my build? So I always recommend following builds for a very long time. And then after a while, maybe when you followed like quite a few, you'll at some point it just clicks and you kind of get it. How do I know if an item is good? We have a lesson from last season, which is basically how to understand if an item is worth. So that's on YouTube already. Have you done or will you do a first playthrough guide? So I have a long series called Play With Me's or Everything Explained. There's 2 different series I do basically where they're long of the entire campaign. So they're literally 3 to 5 hours long, and they're called either Everything Explained or Play With Me. So either of those will work. And I'll do a very, very cheap build with a full Play With Me, full playthrough of the entire campaign where I explain everything I'm doing, why I'm picking up certain items, what quests I'm doing, etc. And I try to explain everything. But obviously these are very long. It's hard to do something like that in short. Realistic goals for players with 4 hours per day. 4 hours per day, you can do honestly everything on softcore. Everything. I would recommend having a very strong build as your starter though. Is it already known which builds is going to be strong next league? No. So the patch notes come out on Tuesday the 13th. So in 3 or 4 days. We have a team of people working alongside me, and we'll be putting out a lot of league starters. We're hoping to get maybe as many as 8 to 10 this time. So we're going to go really, really hard and try to make a lot of league starters. I think that's all we have time for questions because I want a little quick break before next time. Before the next episode, and we started a little late. But the next one is going to be Gear 101. And do remember there's a lot of informative content on my YouTube as well. So we do also have a feedback form. Araki, can you link that in chat? We do actually have a feedback form. So if there's some things you think could be better, if there's some things you liked more last time, then you can give feedback on that. And we are working on making like mock exams and tests with some like resources and stuff just for fun for the next semester. But I hope you guys enjoyed the introduction to Path of Exile. Hopefully it was basic enough. It's obviously hard to make something for everybody, but hopefully it helps. And I hope you guys enjoyed. So if you're watching on YouTube, sub if you like the video and it helps you out. But the most important thing, try to die less than I